Okay, so hello everyone, welcome to Scientia Science Writing Internship Cohort 3. Today, this is the part of our webinar series, 7th webinar, and for 7th webinar, we have invited Dr. Salman Hameed. Dr. Salman Hameed is the founder and CEO of Kainaat Studios, and he has been talking about astronomy for last 25, 30 years. And he is a professor at Hampshire College in Amherst, Massachusetts. And further, he is also the board member of Scientia and has been advising and guiding us for last couple of years. So over to you, Dr. Salman. Thank you for taking our time and joining us. Welcome to Scientia.
Well, thank you very much. So thank you for inviting me, and Scientia is doing an amazing job. I always say that. Foz, I see Sadhika is here as well, and others. It's an honor, it's a privilege actually to talk about science communication in this perspective. So what I'm going to do, as I was telling Foz as well, I'm going to take about 15 to 20 minutes to talk about a few things, set out the guidelines, maybe even less, who knows. But my main goal today is to talk about something that I actually think is a serious challenge, not just for science, but I think in general to communication, news, everything. And so I don't necessarily have solutions either. I can just tell you what we try to do, but it's a really hard problem. So let's start and give me questions. The only problem is, I told Foz, I cannot see, once I'll share my full screen of the talk, I won't be able to see you guys. So I'm going to get off that talk after 15 minutes or so, and then we can do that. So once I go over there, I won't be able to see. Foz will have to WhatsApp me if he has anything to say to me.
Definitely.
All right. So let's talk, and I'll tell you why I chose this title. So this talk will change everything, and I am pretty sure that you have seen these kind of headlines, and I will be a little bit more focused on YouTube or videos, right? Because I, along with Foz and others, we actually create video content. And if we are talking about science communication right now, I know Scientia is actually great in written journalism, but videos are a big part. In fact, I mean, videos are consumed quite a bit. Fortunately or unfortunately, that's a separate question to that. But videos are used a lot, and it's a rich format, right? I mean, you can actually communicate a lot. You can impact a lot. And just as a 5-second personal example, but Foz knows that, and a bunch of other people know that. I got interested in astronomy. I got interested in doing a PhD in astronomy because of a video, Carl Sagan's Cosmos, that was shown in 1980s. So to me, there is a huge impact that videos can make. So that's one part of it. And surely enough, right now, I don't have the statistics, but I think on YouTube, per second, thousands of videos are uploaded, right? And that is not a constant. It's a constant increase in the number of videos that are being uploaded on YouTube per second. The numbers are insane, right? So how do you get viewership? And that in itself, that's where the challenge lies. And in some sense, if you're creating a video, it takes an effort. And so if you create a video, you want people to see it. But if you, say, for example, you made an excellent video. What if 5 people saw it? Not even your whole family saw it. So you will be like, wait a minute, I need to figure something out. I've put in an effort. It's a good video. I have done a good job. I want people to see it. How do you compete with so many videos being uploaded per second? That's the foundational challenge in there. And so how do we think about it within the context of science? So let me first give you an example. I'm going to give you a couple of examples, but right now I'll start with this. This is actually from a podcast, from a video channel called Cool World. It's actually a really excellent channel. If you are looking for high-level astronomy discussion, go to Cool World. This person is a professor actually at Columbia University. He's really excellent. His work is beyond reproach, and his videos are actually not sensational. They do an excellent job. And yet, when I saw this thumbnail, I'm like, oh no. And I know where he's coming from. He's a professor over there. I can see why this particular thumbnail was made, because you want to get attention. And I would say 2 years ago, when a lot of the YouTube thumbnails starting to do that. I mean, before that, you would be like, okay, here is a thumbnail that says, well, this. And usually this has emphasis or arrow or something like that too. This is important, or this changes everything. You'd be like, oh, what happened? You would click on that. Now, when I see this, I go like, oh, probably it's not a big deal. Probably it's not an important news. And there is a problem with that for science communication, because then how do you communicate really news items that are worthy of big news? I don't know. But now my reaction to it is, when I see this type of a thumbnail, I just scroll through. I just go like, yeah. Okay, what's next? This probably it's not a big deal, because no, things do not change every day. Everything does not change every day, right? Everything changes maybe once every 100 years, or maybe once every 10 years, or whatever. Everything actually never changes, but you get the point, right? From science perspective, astronomy perspectives, I mean, I think if you look at the last 20 years, what news item are you going to pick to say, this changes everything? This is a question for you. Which science news you pick to say, this changes everything in the last, say, 20, 30 years? Right? I mean, for me, in the 90s, I can think of two: discovery of the first extrasolar planet. From astronomy perspective, I think that was really big. Perhaps the discovery of that the universe is not just expanding, but it's accelerating, which we call now dark energy. Yeah, that was in the late 90s. Those two things were big deal. Last 10, 20 years, maybe the discovery of gravitational waves. It doesn't change everything, but it's a great thing that we discovered gravitational waves. Maybe, but you get my point, right? It's actually really hard to come up with this, that what would justify a YouTube thumbnail that says, this changes everything. So just before, this morning, for me, I know yours is evening, I actually did just a simple Google search and on thumbnails on YouTube. This changes everything and science on YouTube. And as you can see, without much effort, here are a lot of the titles that came in. And these are not just bad titles. So for example, Naomi Klein, she's a wonderful writer. She actually works really well on climate change, on other types of things. She has this title, This Changes Everything, because she gave a talk on that. And maybe her book is also This Changes Everything is coming out. But you can actually see all around it, you have these thumbnails. And I should mention, oftentimes, like here in Cool World, there is also a particular type of framing, like, and look, I am not blaming people because, or maybe I am, but I also do the same thing because I create videos as well. And I have to figure out what a thumbnail is going to look like. So I also have to do, hey, this is important, or this is something that's interesting. But the issue that I'm trying to point out is that the scale of sensationalism that you see down here, I mean, this changes everything. That is way, way high. And the problem with that is, where are you going to go? I am already, and I'm sure a lot of you are already numb to this level of sensationalism. What's next? How are you going to do that? So this is a particular challenge, that the reason we do this is because we need to get somebody to view or read our material regarding science. If nobody reads or watches our material, then perhaps who are you communicating to? So there is this tension, but algorithms work based upon getting the most attention, the fastest way possible. So YouTube algorithm works, and we actually work on that. YouTube algorithm works based upon how many people click on your video in, say, for example, the first hour. Right? So you need to get immediate attention. It's not like people think about it. They go, yeah, this is a good type of thing. Okay, so that's the framing. This is the primary thing I want to focus on, but what to do about that. So I'm going to just suggest a few things. They may or may not be effective, may or may not be pleasing, but this is something that we try to do. But this problem, and we can come back to questions, we can actually figure out what to do about it, and maybe you guys have some suggestions regarding that. I mean, for me, how do you think about science communication? And for me, the three pillars, in some sense, are honesty, accuracy, and storytelling, right? Meaning to say, and I'll give you each and every example of those things. But to me, if you are talking about science communication in particular, so this talk is not about politics. This talk is not about other things. I'm just talking about, if we want to do science communication, then what should be the key things to that? And again, with the thing in mind, you want people to read your work, or you want people to watch your work, right? So it's not like it's a really boring thing, because we, of course, you can also write research papers, but those are not meant to communicate science to a broader audience, right? So I'm talking about, so with that thing in mind, that I'm talking about broad science communication. So let me give you examples to that, and of course I'm going to give you examples from the work that we do, because I create videos on YouTube about astronomy. I'm an astronomer by training, so I'm going to give you examples regarding that, and of course these can be applicable to other things too, but I'm just going to talk about examples from astronomy. First one is that sometimes, and from the South Asian context, Pakistan context as well, sometimes people get upset about questions of origins, and they go like, well, origin of life, for example, and they go like, science doesn't know how life started. Or people can be upset about origins of humans, or can be upset about evolution, right? None of those things have any bearing on what is actually true. People can be upset about it. But when we are communicating science, I mean, we present stuff that is there, whether people like it or not, right? And so, for example, here was a talk on how did life begin on Earth. By the way, you can also find it ironic or whatever, like, because you will also see me on these thumbnails doing things that I'm also posing, right? This is everything, like, or something like that. I can be angry about it, but anyway, so you will also see me, unfortunately, on these thumbnails posing for what the thumbnail should look like. But my point is, you have to be honest about what science and majority of scientists are saying. You can actually present something that is a outside idea, that is a not accepted by all, but it's a new idea, and that is fine. But you have to mention that alongside with that. So, so for example, if you highlight a really new, outside the box idea that is out there, because there are always scientific ideas out there that are not accepted by all scientists. I mean, that's how ideas change, and that's what makes science interesting. That's what makes it exciting. When you are reporting it, you have to provide that context, that this idea is actually an outside mainstream idea. So why am I talking about that? So for example, you can have ideas. I mean, sometimes people talk about, give example, it's much easier on, for example, evolution and stuff. And you can say, I know a scientist who actually has a paper out on X, like shows evolution is wrong, for example, which is not. I mean, evolution itself is accepted by pretty much almost all scientists. So you have to provide this context that, well, I mean, it's an unusual idea. Second thing is, and this is actually what I'm referring to, is accuracy. And this is related to what I was referring to. And that is, sometimes you have discoveries that are made, but how do you report it? So here is a case where there were a lot of stories out. This was, I think, earlier this year, when new James Webb Space Telescope results were coming out, and the telescope is detecting galaxies that are a bit bigger than what you might have expected. Okay. Now, the person who actually was one of the scientists one of the astronomers who were part of the team that was doing these observations, wrote a terrible paper, a public article. He actually wrote the article that said, "We broke the universe," which I think is a terrible article. It wasn't meant for other scientists, other astronomers, because that's not how astronomers talk about it. Right? But it was picked up, and the way it was reported was that James Webb Space Telescope challenges Big Bang or refutes Big Bang, and so on and so forth. It had nothing to do with that, the actual results. And the reason is, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, is that it's a new telescope, and the way you interpret results is always complicated, and there are always various things before you get to a claim that Big Bang is refuted. Okay, so for our perspective, I mean, the reason why I put it in is like, it's like you have to have things represented accurately. So what things go into thinking about that? So for example, again, I'm putting myself on the sort of like example thing. But again, so here I wanted to make sure that no, James Webb did not refute the Big Bang, but there is a challenge to that, because we did put in the title that says, "Did James Webb refute the Big Bang?" Right? I mean, so if somebody just reads the title, you can still be pushed in that direction. But then I am skeptical. We also add how to think critically, and so on and so forth. So there's that. And the third thing, the third pillar, I would say, is about storytelling. So here there was a comment. There was a comment actually just last month as well, but this was a comment about 2 years ago, and wanted to put in sort of like, that how do you tell a story? So this is a particular video where we bring up historically how comets have been looked at. So for example, for Roman Emperor Caesar, when he died, it was there was a scramble for power, and one of his I think it was his step nephew, or it was his nephew, who actually used this opportunity. He was one of the contenders for the successor to be Caesar, and There were Olympic Games that he organized actually in honor of the death of Caesar, but a comet appeared in the sky. And within the local context, he actually used the comet to say, well, Caesar's spirit, God's approved the way he died, and God approves the way I am organizing these games, and his spirit is actually being taken to the heavens by the comet. And so comet actually played a crucial role in establishing the succession the way it happened. And in fact, there is a temple of the comet in Rome as well. And of course, within the South Asian context, Mirza Ghalib, who one of the, perhaps I shouldn't even say one of the, but perhaps the greatest poet in Urdu language. There was a comet in 1857. This is a big date for the British and resistance to the British over there. There was a rebellion, revolt, whatever you want to call it, War of Independence in 1857, but there was a comet around that. And so Mirza Ghalib actually wrote about that as well. So here is a way the video actually talks about the comet, but you can actually tell a story around why comets have been important, how they have actually shaped humans and human history, right? So storytelling component. So here are the three components of there, okay? And I'm just gonna mention, again, from astronomy perspective, because we deal with astronomy, but it could be for any other thing. But I mean, it's for astronomy, we already have a built-in interest. And that is true for some other fields as well, but usually not for all. Like, so if you are a materials engineer, I mean, it would take a little bit harder, or I would say, and my apologies for that, like, chemistry. It takes, although chemistry is actually pretty good because you can do actually a lot of experiments. Actually, you can actually show things. Biology, I think, is really interesting, so and so forth. But I'm saying, but for astronomy, actually, it really helps because the questions of origins and place in our universe is like, baked into the subject. Plus, you can have strange objects like neutron stars, black holes. You have sort of like, sulfur rain on planets. You can have diamond sort of like, rain on inside Uranus and Neptune's atmospheres. You can have lakes of methane on Titan, and you can have strange planets that are orbiting stars, and so on and so forth. So it's actually, things can really capture imagination, but we don't even need that much imagination, because then you have these stunning images that come from Hubble Space Telescope or James Webb Space Telescope or other telescopes that come in. You can even actually see those things from small telescopes. You can see the Orion Nebula, for example, which is beautiful. You can see the rings of Saturn. It's just there. And of course, with astronomy, you also have the connection to science fiction. So you can imagine. I mean, I know people's favorite, sort of like Interstellar, for example, and so many shows that are about science fiction as well. So we actually have a relatively good going in terms of science communication. Astronomy is actually pretty good. All right. So why astronomy? I just mentioned all of those connections. I'm going to just go forward with that. So again, origin of life, stream objects, you have nebula, great pictures, and you have connection to science fiction. And that's where I was going to come in, and I'm going to end close to that. Because people pay attention to, so we do not need to go the sensational route. That would be my suggestion regarding that, And so here is, with great power comes great responsibility, because for astronomy, we do have this great power because we have a way of getting people's attention. But that's when we actually want to try to avoid that. So how do we avoid falling into the trap of bad science? And one of the things is, so here are a few things that is in there. Cutting edge science is now available immediately, right? I mean, so you are seeing news items. And so for Scientia, probably, or if you are doing science, you are also tracking news stories. You are looking at what is being reported in the news. And oftentimes, some of these results are reported immediately. For example, the result about galaxies that I mentioned with James Webb, but others as well. But it takes a while to actually confirm it. or refuted. And of course, the confirmation is great, but refutation is rarely mentioned. So it takes time. We do have to be part of that. We also have to know that we all like to be part of a great scientific revolution. We go like, things changed. You want to see this changes everything. This goes back to this thing. You want to be part of this changes everything. But it does not happen every day. It does not happen every year. It does not happen every decade. So we have to be skeptical about such claims. We have to be skeptical about how we talk about results that claim to change everything, right? And that's how we contextualize it without taking away the interesting part, because there is a lot of interest already. There is a lot of interesting stories out there, but we don't need to do that. And in astronomy, for example, there are certain things that you constantly see. Discovery of Earth 2.0. There's a threatening asteroid coming. Alien life has been discovered. New physics has been found. Big Bang has been refuted, so on and so forth. And all of this is because sensationalism is rewarded. So we need to be aware of these things. And of course, the connection is that, it's clicks. It's connected to it. So what can we do about it? Well, here are a few things that I would suggest. And that is, again, I'm going to give an example regarding astronomy, but it applies to other things as well. Oftentimes, when there is a news story about science, there is an official press release. So go to the press release, because usually press release is dry. And press release is dry because they try to carefully use words that are accurate. They try to. That's best practice, right? So go over there, original one, rather than the interpretation of it in sort of like some other newspaper. Go to the original site and try to find out what was actually said in that. I mean, press release is meant to communicate the key important results to you. And so what are they actually saying? And then, of course, connected to that, see, results have been published in reputable peer-reviewed journal. That's not always the case, but look for it, like, that, oh, they have been published. That's a good thing. Is it a good journal, or is it sort of like, so that's another thing to look for it. In astronomy, that could be a little tricky, because if you have telescope results or spacecraft results, usually those are published even before they get in a peer-reviewed journal. But again, look for the original press release. They actually usually clarify those things. And I think the biggest thing is, like, to build your own team of fact checkers and experts. Like, the journals that you look for: Science, Nature, two top journals that are sort of like, if things go over there, those news stories are important. So if something big happens in astronomy, if it's important enough for a broad public interest, then it would be published in either Science or Nature. And I would be like, if it's not published in either of those journals, I'd be like, why not? But anyway, those two journals are really important because they speak to the broader scientific community. If an article is in there, that means a scientific article, that means that the journal and the reviewers consider that discovery to be important enough, not just for that particular field, but for scientists in general. So Science and Nature are actually really important benchmarks to a certain degree to do that, but not necessarily, but most of the time. But there are also sites, again, for astronomy. There's astronomy.com, there's space.com. Those are actually good. New York Times is usually pretty good. They have a science section over there. And then, of course, like, for me and for our team, I mean, I find sort of like, there are people, there is an excellent website called Starts with a Bang by Ethan Sagel. He's really good. Dr. Becky, she's a professor in England. She's really good on YouTube. or Universe Today, that's run by Fraser Kane. He's really good. So there are all these people, and Cool Worlds. I would actually put Cool Worlds in there as well, but even though I actually made that comment about that. And the key thing is that it takes time to build the resources that you trust, but you need to have your own trust resource with the way you can go to. So if a story is out, instead of going first in and reporting on that. So let me just give you 2 examples where things are terrible. So for example, a few years ago, there was a story about life on Venus. Now, the result actually was interesting, right? And here is the way it was presented initially. The scientists had found the presence of a colorless, smelly gas called phosphine in the atmosphere of Venus. It is known to be primarily produced by some species of bacteria that survive on oxygen-starved environments. I think somebody's microphone is open. I think it's giving me a feedback in there. But anyway, so that is the real source. That they did not find extraterrestrial life. They did not find life on Venus. What they found was a presence of a particular gas called phosphine, and it on Earth is often connected to life. Now, that's not exactly the best attention-grabbing headline. So they used, could Venus possibly be hosting extraterrestrial life? Life on Venus, question mark. Is it wrong? No. But is it misleading? I think probably it is, right? Because it certainly takes you to that probably the result says something about extraterrestrial life. It actually did not. And so how do you balance that out? So, I think this is an example where you have to be careful in your foundational headline, because what people are going to read is not this paragraph that is written. Many people are going to just read, could Venus possibly be hosting extraterrestrial life on Venus? And so they're going to say, probably life has been discovered on Venus. And then again, the example that I was giving you earlier, this is the discovery of those galaxies. And so the person who was one of the researchers involved in the work, he actually explicitly said, we just discovered the impossible. That's terrible. You can never discover the impossible, because obviously that is possible. Part 1. Part 2, so if I can give you an update. So this news story, if you look at closely, it's from February 25th, 2023. And it followed by, and Machiu Kaku, probably a lot of people know know him, but look at all the thumbnails that goes along with that. We were wrong. Who's laughing now? The choice said that, the universe is older than the Big Bang. They lied to us. We were wrong. It has bigger, all of those things. This ends all debate, right? They were all wrong, Einstein, So what happened? This seems to me a pretty big deal. In theory, we should be right now all working on something, reporting on something that, wow, it all turned out to be wrong. But as it turns out, no. It was interesting because that's where interesting stuff happens. But it turns out no, the galaxies look bigger because we all measure, we only see light. So the question is, how do you translate light into how big the galaxy is? And that's a huge problem. And people knew actually that, that early universe may have different composition of what is contributing to light. And hence it may not be an issue. And that's what turns out to be the case. Very interesting, but nothing to do with breaking the universe or the Big Bang. So I'm going to stop at that. And I know I had said I'm going to take 20 minutes and I took probably 40 or 30. So my apologies for that. But here are, I am open to your questions. So thank you very much.
Okay, so I think we can take all the questions from the chat box and comment, and I would get those questions to you. Okay.
And I will stop sharing it
Yeah.
so that I can see you people. Yeah, you guys. Okay. All right.
Okay. So here is this first question: where should the line be drawn between engaging content and unethical sensationalism? From Zaya.
Thank you, Zainab, for your question. I mean, I think it depends. It's a hard question, right? I mean, because people have different tolerance for where that. You use unethical sensationalism. I personally think, for example, that if somebody reports that those galaxies are imply that the Big Bang model has been refuted, in my mind, that's certainly inaccurate, but I would almost say that it is unethical, right? And you can argue this is not a clear-cut demarcation, because somebody can say, well, it's not unethical, it's just exaggeration. Okay, but let me say a few words why I'm taking a much harder line on this, because there is a context to it. Oftentimes, Big Bang is one of those areas where it's not just about science, but people conflate those things with religion, with other worldviews and other things too, right? Compared to let's combine the two examples that I gave towards the end. One story was about life on Venus, right? I think I would not classify that as an unethical sensationalism, because they did, first of all, they have a very explicit, if you actually read the paragraph, that actually does describe the actual discovery of phosphine and things like that, and it says like, da-di-da-di-da. But then they spiced it up by a little bit, right? I think as science communicators, that's a problem, but I don't see that as unethical. Okay, now the Big Bang one, in particular, the Machio Kaku YouTube thumbnails and things like that, well, that I think it follows the unethical bit, because the way they are being presented is just one side. That you're not even seeing the actual corrector in there. In the life on Venus stuff, the corrector was right there. Just you had to make a little bit of more effort to find what the real story was. Little bit of an effort. But in the Big Bang refuted ones, the way they are being presented, and the way it was presented actually oftentimes in videos and in articles, was not really going into the details about the uncertainty of the results. Right? The focus was that, whoa, you have galaxies that should not exist, or that would make these galaxies that must have formed before the Big Bang, right? So on and so forth. If that is untrue, right? So I would say, from the science communication perspective, that crosses the line of unethical sensationalism, because you are genuinely misrepresenting, or you are not taking the time to find out what the accurate representation is. And I think so. I would say that, and again, within the larger context, because the topic, you can talk about something like this type of misrepresentation, for example, about what's happening to Betelgeuse. It talks about whether it's going to go supernova or not, and things like that. Yeah, sure, but it would be harder to get to that level of unethical sensationalism, because that is not a topic that is at the center of broader understanding and broader interest to people. The topic of Big Bang is. So you have to be more careful in terms of that. hopefully I sort of kind of give the answer.
Okay. Sadhika has a comment. Could you see, or I could
Yeah,
stop?
I can read that. So Sadhika has a comment that I came across several videos from popular channels like Aaj News and Suno TV. Many of these videos promote baseless claims regarding changes in our solar system and the existence of alien life. I've noticed that these channels seem to lack science editors who can scrutinize the content and verify its authenticity. Unfortunately, many lay people blindly believe and share this misinformation in their social media accounts. What do you think is the best way to prevent the spread of such content? Sadhika, I've seen those too. That's very hard, and it's a little bit like I mean there are, again, that is a I would put that under, you have a competition between completely sensational news sources. So they're oftentimes not just science, but other news are also like that, and they would present this material and they would not have any reservations regarding that, right? So yeah, you can actually, some of these news items would be crowd pleasers, right? I mean, so alien life or other types of things are some things that people want to believe, and they would present it that the way I would say that you cannot compete with the attention they are going to get. You simply cannot, because your responsibility is still what the accurate science information is. But two things I would say regarding that. One is, if you establish your brand, meaning to say, well, we try to be careful, we try to do that. You have to build your own brand. I have a little bit of hope, not too much, but a little bit of hope that people again go numb. I mean, not numb necessarily. A lot of people don't care. I mean, this is like hearing something about astrological predictions, or predictions what's going to happen in the next year. People always make predictions. They don't care. It's just entertainment, right? It's not. There are a lot of people who will not be watching that content to really get science information or be curious about those answers, right? Now, for them, yeah, alien life found. 2 months later, there will be another alien life found. Nobody is going to make the connection. Wait a minute, what happened to the previous alien life, right? Aliens. What happened to those ones that landed in Roswell or whatever? Like, you're not going, for a lot of people, that connection is not going to be there. But in some sense, we need to build this base of people who do care, which is a subsection of the people who purely go into the sensational content. So you need to find those people who are interested in that. They get swayed, or they look for content in there on Aaj TV or Suno TV and things like that, but they are also genuinely interested. And they are the ones who are, they're going to see that once, twice, 3 times, but then they'll be like, I'm really interested. Where else can I find information about that? And those are the people that you have to do. But in order to get those people, you need to have a sort of like, a big foundation, meaning to say it takes a lot of time to establish trust. It takes a lot of time to establish what sort of like, is that people can trust that when you say something, when you say that this is actually important, people go like, huh, why are they saying that? Let me give you an example. I mean, when I see something on the channels that I follow or articles that I follow, Ethan Segal, for example, if he, doesn't mean that I blindly follow Ethan Segal or others, but what I'm trying to say is, if he writes something and he goes like, this is a really interesting result, and you go like, let me go and actually see why is he saying that. I thought it's a little odd, but I would go and look at it because I have built or he, or like, I have trust in what he reports. Now, I may sometimes still disagree with him, but there is a level of, in some sense, in your mind, you don't have to meet the person, but in your mind, you have built a relationship with that source. Right? And to your question, I think we have to build that type of trust with those people. We cannot prevent the spread of this information, because that is the nature of system. Like, meaning to say, somebody just wrote clickbait, I'm going to come back to it, but like, the problem is that that is how we as humans, and by humans I mean humans that are running social media and other things too, that's how we have built up the system to reward sensationalism. So we cannot do anything regarding the large system, but we can try to get people who are looking for better content, because our goal in some sense is that actual science without sensationalism is actually pretty cool. And if something is not true, like finding aliens, after once, after twice, after three, after four times, some of these people are going to be sort of like, upset about that. So that's part of that. Hopefully I sort of like, came back to it. So next, Fawaz, should I keep on taking the questions from the chat?
Yes.
Okay, so Khadija Tariq, her question is, I would like to know, how can I communicate research, my field genetics, keeping my ELSI to avoid ELSI? Now, I want to make sure to avoid public aversion. What is ELSI? Sorry, my keeping in my
ethical, legal, and social issues.
Oh, ethical, legal, and social issues. Okay. So ethically, yeah, right. Well, I mean, this is really a crucial thing, and there, I think, I'm still. I mean, you are actually giving me other examples, so that is good. That actually goes into an interesting category. So unlike astronomy, the examples that I give, you have these ethical issues that come in that actually, in some sense, you also have to think about how they can impact other people reading your articles, right? So it's not just about how people are thinking about the universe. I mean, so there is one level of that, and you can go like, hey, whether people should think this way or that way or whatever. This is another complicated thing, that the way you are reporting has implications, because the way people may be impacted, or it may impact the way people's lives works, or the way they think about themselves, and so on and so forth. I would say that I mean, this is, and I should also mention that this is an area where these things are oftentimes evolving, no pun intended, right? But they are changing, and for genetics aspects, I mean, as far as I know, the regulations, ethical issues are often far behind, right? And so what I would suggest regarding that is that you really have to follow the cutting edge ethical guidelines. Right now, they may still not be enough, but you have to be aware of that. So especially like gene editing stuff and things like that, that has come up so quickly. It is so effective. And CRISPR, for example, and people have to respond to that. People still respond right now. So I would suggest regarding that, to be extra careful. I mean, you have to, because now you are talking about things that can personally impact people's lives. Or you're mentioning genetic counseling as well. There are always people writing about these things. So if there is a scientific aspect, and you know, like, no, this has broader implications. Look for ethical guidelines. I think there would be a paper, so that would be an extra work that you will have to do, but there will be a paper that somewhere or somebody must have written something about the ethical issues, and you have to look into that. That's a really important issue in terms of ethical issues regarding that. There are in the US and other places as well, in South Asia, indigenous populations, the way sort of like, there is sometimes experimentation there and so on and so forth. How do we share those results? How do we, and I can even add a complication. Sometimes the way the science was done may be problematic, right? So that's a whole other level, that if you are reporting on that and the way the science was done was problematic, then you should report how you should frame that, how you should report on that. Complicated, but on the other hand, I would say also exciting. I mean, from the science reporting perspective, I mean, I think that also allows you to look at the story in a more original way, in a way that allows you to really think about not just science. I'm really interested in policy aspects and other things, and so you are looking at things in a broader context. Science doesn't happen sort of like in isolation. It happens within a context, and so these ethical issues are really important to think about. But it also gives you, on a positive side, it gives you a way to make that story richer. Okay. Gopika Krishnan, thank you for the very insightful talk. Thank you. Do you think that sensational titles come as kind of necessary evil to public attention on social media, even if the content is authentic? To me, it looks like kind of clickbait in science communication. Okay, that's that's central to the problem, the challenge that we have. You are absolutely right. That's the reason I was saying that you can create an amazing video, right? I mean, and I'm talking, let me give you an example of videos, because we have this conversation every time we have a video up, right? If you don't make it the title and the thumbnail, so that's the way the YouTube algorithm works. If you don't make it interesting enough, you can have a video that content is amazing, for example, but your thumbnail is not interesting and people are not immediately clicking, then people are not going to watch it. Now, part of the science communication bit is like, you want people to watch it or to read it. So you want to make. So I think there is you are right. You are saying like, is it a little bit of a clickbait in science communication? I think there is. But the way I would, and we have talked about it many times. I mean, Foz knows about this. There is a question of where is that boundary line between making it appealing, that's the word I would use, okay? Making it appealing versus clickbait. And I think the line where it comes in is where clickbait is using an unjustified language or unjustified exaggeration, that you have used the title in a way that does not justify the result. I think that that's where I would say it becomes clickbait versus appealing, right? We have our latest video that we made. We actually added something. We said James Webb Telescope's stunning new image, right? Okay. Now, and the story in the title, the story is also about objects called brown dwarfs, right? So a lot of the video is about brown dwarfs are objects that are between a star and a planet. So they are bigger than a planet, but smaller than a star. These are interesting objects for scientific reasons. Now, this James Webb Space Telescope's recent image actually has information about these brown dwarfs. So the video is about this image and about those brown dwarfs. But we did say that James Webb's latest image is stunning, right? Now, I know a lot of people, if we just said James Webb Space Telescope reveals information about brown dwarfs, right? I mean, I think that is an accurate title as well. James Webb Space Telescope reveals information about brown dwarfs. I can imagine that would have less appeal, that's what we think, than, for example, saying that a stunning new image from James Webb Space Telescope, and we added, in the title, we added informs us about brown dwarfs or whatever. So I don't think, at least that's what I hope, and that's what I think, I don't think that is clickbait, because we are actually talking about the new image, which I do think it's stunning, I do think it's beautiful. We are talking about that, But if I said that something in terms of James Webb Space Telescope new image discovers a strange object, now, which is a brown, say for example, which is brown dwarf, or find something that is neither a star nor a planet, that would be a clickbait, because brown dwarfs are known. They have, they have been discovered before. They are, strange. Well, not really strange. They just are between, they are neither star nor a planet. I think that is true. So, but if I placed it in there, I think then that would be a slightly misleading. That's so that's how I would differentiate that. Okay. Muhammad Ehsan, do you think that regulatory bodies of social media platforms can help scrutinize sensationalism and misinformation? No, I don't think so, because they do that a little bit, right? They do that when there is pressure on particular type of disinformation. So US elections are here on Tuesday. Even that, which at one point was a big deal, that they are going to curb down on misinformation, even that has been pulled out, and that's not happening. Elon Musk, owner of Twitter, is actually openly giving out misinformation, right? That level, totem pole of where importance of science comes in for misinformation is pretty low. If you're talking about democracy, you're talking about elections and things like that. If that is not happening, to believe that social media companies would have regulatory bodies telling them what science should be put in and not, social media companies are there to make profits. A lot of their profits are made from sensational material, right? Because that's the nature of the algorithm, right? So the nature of so people like Joe Rogan and others, again, aliens are often found in there. In fact, Donald Trump talked about aliens on his podcast as well, right? Should there be a disclaimer? They're not going to put disclaimer on it. Vaccine denial, that was a big issue. Again, public health issue number one, vaccine. That wasn't really changed in there. Okay, so I really don't think that can happen, and that is where, I will say, we will end on a sad note, right? This is an uphill battle, and this is an uphill battle because we are all trying to communicate through a medium, internet, through social media, because even Scientia, it is available, but in order to get to Scientia articles, more or less, unless people directly go there, a lot of people are going to be directed through Facebook, through Twitter, through Instagram, through TikTok, or whatever, right? And the problem is that the very nature of those platforms are driven in a way that discourages any kind of constraint that discourages any kind of moderation regarding that. So that goes back to the earlier question about Sadhaka. Like, so okay, so you cannot impact everybody. You cannot what Raj TV is doing or other TV is doing. Like, you cannot compete with them, because the nature of the beast, the algorithm, the way it is designed, rewards sensationalism. What I'm arguing is that you should not you should not make it exceptional, sensational, right? That there is a competition in there. So I think what we can do potentially is not rely. It's not going to happen at social media as well. But what you need to do is to build your own base of people who value good information, that they trust and rely on you. It takes a while to build that trust. It's very easy to break it, by the way. So if you succumb to sensational stuff, it takes only one time to actually lose faith in it. But it takes a while to build that. And I think that is the way to counter it. Is it going to change the world? This will change the world. No, I don't know. I mean, I think that's very hard. I really hope one way that it can change things is that a broader cultural shift happens, which actually there is a little bit of thing that I'm hearing about Gen Zs, for example, the newer generation, the younger generation, like you guys, that there is more mistrust of social media companies. Yeah, that can change things, but that's a broader cultural shift, I think, that can do that. But in either case, whether there is a broader cultural shift or not, you need to build your own brand of authentic, ethical, and good storytelling science. I think that's what you need to build. And whether big change happens or not, that's a separate thing, but you are still contributing to that. But you cannot take on the big companies because they have money riding on it, and a lot of people working on exactly the opposite thing that you are trying to do.
Well, I think we are up with the time, and importantly, this has been amazing and insightful, and quite amazing things were mentioned with regard to social media regulations and headlines, which has been clickbaits all over. And more importantly, as you mentioned about the cultural shift, which could really change out the way as we start distrusting, we start not trusting these companies, and so eventually they have to comply some sort of. So I think, thank you, Dr. Salman, for your time and your talk. Questions have been amazing. A lot of information have been exchanged. So this was really good. Thank you, Dr. Salman.
Thank you very much. Lovely questions. I really enjoyed the session. So, and good luck with all of this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.